Do you also agree that he is a handsome boy?
Hi, I'm Andy.
And I'm Roger.
And welcome to The Middle,
where we try to have thoughtful conversations
about awkward topics
on our search to find the middle.
That's fatphobic.
I don't feel war. I just own halfway to Siwa.
A few moments ago, Buckingham Palace announced the death of Her Majesty Queen Elizabeth II.
I act as if God exists.
Put your masks on.
How dare you? You have stolen my dreams, my childhood, with your empty words.
Andy, how you doing?
Oh, good, Roger. How are you?
Struck down with a cold again. Standard life of being a dad. When it comes to colds, are you the kind of person who tries to kind of blow their nose and clear it all out? Or do you actually just live with it and just kind of not, you know what I mean though, right? Like some people are very much like, I have to get as much phlegm out of my body as aggressively as possible, or do you just kind of go with it?
That seems like a very Eastern philosophy of like medicine to, extract the toxins from the body as opposed to manage symptoms. Like,
when you walk past the massage places, the Asian massage places, we haven't spoken about massage for a while now, so unlike us. You know how they advertise the ones where you put your foot in and they turn it on, they're like, oh, after 30 minutes, the water's all black and looks like tar, and look at all the toxins that we are extracting from your body.
I think that's just the mold from the foot spa, isn't it?
Apparently it happens whether your feet are in there or not. It just like something happens to the water through running the current through. But anyway.
You've been busy shopping. Black Friday coming up.
Oh, yeah. When do you think it became a thing in Australia?
So just remind me. So the other one is like Cyber Monday. Or is it Cyber Monday?
No, I think you're thinking of a specific sex toy promotion. But it's not really widespread.
Because there's like two, right? One's to do with Thanksgiving. Is that this one?
Yeah. Yeah. So Black Friday is the main one that I know of.
Isn't? But what's this thing like? I'm gonna look this up. There's another thing called like Cyber Monday or something, right?
Yeah, I'm not sure.
It
sounds familiar, but I feel like all these things are taglines in some kind of marketing campaign.
So Cyber Monday 2023. So so the thing I don't understand. So you've got Black Friday. So I assume that's tomorrow.
Yeah, 24th.
Okay, so Black Friday, but then you also have this thing called Cyber Monday. So I can't figure out. And when's Thanksgiving? Is that this weekend or something in America?
I don't know, man. Again, it's an American thing.
Hang on, let's find. So Thanksgiving is the 23rd of November. It's today. So so today is Thanksgiving in the US. So we're recording on Thursday the 23rd, and you'll get this if you're listening on Sunday. So so Black Friday must be like the day after, and then they need like another bite at the cherry, so they have Cyber Monday. I don't know. I don't know. Is it? Yeah, and like you said. So I don't know. I only really participated in like Black Friday for the first time, as a consumer. I think last year, and I think that was more because I just wanted to get some Christmas shopping done ahead of schedule. But yeah, I haven't really I'm not really that into. But I don't have anything in mind to buy this year. Yeah, how about you?
No, yeah. I think it's like it's just like a man thing though, right? Like because you don't actually have to plan it all out. I mean, the beauty of this kind of thing is that you're served up suggestions, and I think that's the whole Amazon model now, right? Like you just like opening YouTube where you're like, this is suggested for you.
A couple of weeks ago, you asked us to look at our Uber ratings. Let's do that now with our Amazon recommendations and reveal.
It's on my home screen of my phone, so I'm already there.
You're already there. Okay. Well, you go first then, if you.
Okay. So at the moment, I have a suspiciously white Apple-looking air fryer from Philips with a 50% off Black Friday deal. It looks glorious. I might think about it. To the right, I have 66% off an Extreme SD card. Then I have the mother of all don't even know how to explain it. It's like, imagine a baby gate or a playpen, but it looks like it extends from one end of the room to the other. And then I have a pair of Wayfarers. So they're my 4.
Okay. Well, yours are better than mine. I've got 20% off a grey interior bag. Looks like a camera bag, but it's a camera bag, like a shoulder bag. I don't even know what this is, so I'm going to have to click on the link. Oh, I don't know how I could possibly think that I want a thick premium rubber car foot mat. I must admit, there's nothing in my search history that could possibly have warranted that.
Thick and rubber?
It's extra thick. I'm going to guess it's like one of those Bluetooth speakers. It's a DOS, DOSS Bluetooth speaker. It comes in 3 colors, but for some reason black is the cheapest and white is the most expensive. And it's quite
typical.
It's quite a different. So the white version of this cost $95.70, and the black version is going for $50.99. So
yeah, look, like that's actually quite interesting because put aside all your racial, over and undertones.
Not from me.
It's the Apple effect. It's the Apple effect. Anything that you can take anything and then just make it white, any item, and you can charge more for it because it looks like an Apple product.
Well,
I see it all the time, right? If you want to get the white torch or you want to get the white headset, there was, our microphones. They had like a white version of it, and it was the same thing, but yeah, just $50 more.
Well, my final thing is white, and it's called an AirFly Pro. And it's a wireless transmitter receiver with audio sharing for up to 2 AirPods wireless headphones to any audio jack for use on airplanes, boats, or in a gym, home, or auto. And this actually goes against the grain because the white version is $70 and the black version is $71.95. So,
wow, there you go. I mean, I have thought about that actually because I did want to use my AirPods on a flight, and obviously you can't do that using their own entertainment systems. So I thought actually, yeah, now they have all these little ones you can stick in their seat, and then you can still use your own headphones.
I got to say though, like those 4 deals like recommended for me, Amazon's like not really tuned into me.
They're slacking.
Like I've got to say, like, if that's like the Black Friday bonanza for me, I'm quite happy and content not to participate.
I feel like there would have been heaps of opportunity for you, right? Because we've been on a bit of a spending spree around tech and things like that, and a lot of research and things like that. So I think that there could have been some deals that got you off your seat for sure.
I think I have everything that is within like an affordable price range that I want. So I'm not looking for anything at the moment. And then anything else is like going to be a big purchase, and it's not one that I'm looking to make now anyway. So anything that by definition I would buy during a Black Friday sale is going to be some crap that I don't need.
Yeah, but that's the beauty of it. Like that's what you want. You want to buy something that you don't need because the sale's the only time you can do it. Maybe they're just kind of skipping Black Friday on your particular profile because they know they're going to get you on Cyber Monday. What's been really interesting, though, is that it has moved into retail as well. So, in my estimation of the whole thing, Black Friday, was an online thing. It was state-driven kind of e-commerce. When I say state, it's like American. And now it's actually really in the vernacular in Australia. And whenever you go to the shops like your Westfields and, bricks and mortar, they have Black Friday signage everywhere, right?
They have to as well because, consumers will buy online if they don't. And this is the best chance to buy before Christmas, right? So if you're stocking up or you're thinking about buying something, this kind of just nudges you like across the line. And maybe psychologically too, it's beneficial because it's sufficiently far away from Christmas that if you kind of you might like convince yourself it's kind of an early Christmas present, but then still buy yourself a Christmas present as well.
Yeah. Well, we're all to blame apparently for our own inflation in Australia. So homegrown terror.
Yeah.
So we're still licking our wounds as a nation in some ways from the voice referendum, but there's been a lot in the news cycle to distract us from that. I will give it that. Obviously not hoping for all the disasters globally, but it has been very forgiving in a way. And I think Anthony Albanese has been on a bit of a whirlwind tour of various diplomatic visits and things of that nature. And he's copped a lot of mixed results from that. Obviously, a lot of it's from the opposition and about him traveling abroad and losing that kind of inward focus, which always happens. What's your take on how it's all been reported at the moment?
Well, okay, so Federal Labor barely ahead in the latest polls. This is an article I'm reading from The Conversation, dated the 19th of November. The latest federal YouGov poll, conducted November 10 to 14 from a sample of about 1,500, gave Labor a 51 to 49 lead, a 2-point gain for the coalition since early October. Primary votes were 36% for the coalition, which is steady, 31% for Labor, down 2, 13% for the Greens, down 1, 7% for One Nation, up 1. It must be all those videos on YouTube that they're pumping out, and 13% for
who animates them? The Koreans?
What's that? Oh,
so who animates them? The Koreans?
It's not Pauline Hanson. So yeah, I mean, so I think there's probably a few things, right? So the last 6 months has been dominated by national conversation about The Voice and the referendum, and they've invested not all of their bandwidth or, their communication bandwidth, not all of it, but at least like a significant chunk of it prosecuting that case. And that has taken whatever share of their ability to communicate with Australian people and has left this small component left to kind of signal to the Australian people that they're doing things to help all of the things that actually people care about. So cost of living, whatever, right? And I think that's contributed partially to a sense of kind of inaction or missing inaction on some key things. But then also I think Australians are doing it pretty tough at the moment. Like there's a sense we're going backwards with inflation so high, with the tide is turning. We've had interest rate rises. It feels like house price increases, rental price increases, all of those things mean that a lot of Australians are losing a bit of hope, a bit of optimism. And if you look at your government and you don't see them sort of 110% dedicated to whether they're actually solving the problems or not, but at least a sense that they're committed to solving those problems, that's going to make you think twice about them, right? Or you're going to give them a little bit more, skepticism than what you might otherwise.
Yeah, I think so. They did put a lot of eggs in the referendum basket in terms of what they wanted to push over the line. But I think, the cost of living thing is an interesting thing for me, right? Because, I don't know, everyone has their different impact from it. And maybe you're in a better place to answer this than me from, stepping outside of our experience, right? Our immediate experience. But when they say cost of living crisis, what do you think the majority of people are being impacted by? Like when they day to day or kind of, month to month, when they say, oh, gee, things are getting really expensive, what are they really talking about, do you think?
Well, everything. Everything's more expensive than it was a year and a half, 2 years ago. And I think, just the context of this is that we've had almost preceding the last sort of 2 years or so where it's edged up, inflation's edged up. We've had very low inflation. So we've had probably since the GFC inflation that has been either, well, certainly consistently within the 2 to 3% inflation targeting band that the RBA has when it considers interest rates and all of that stuff. But we actually had, even leading up to the pandemic and during the pandemic, periods of inflation below the target band, so 1% or, under 2%. And so we've had this decade of very, very low inflation. We haven't had wages growth either, but still, people are moving to high paid jobs, so they're still getting a bit of a boost there. But the other thing we've had is very low interest rates. So you have two things in the past sort of decade: low interest rates, low inflation. And then now we're moving to a world where we have higher interest rates and much higher inflation. In fact, the highest inflation we've seen for decades. So when you combine that, like they're very real. So I don't know, like even today, like I went to the local supermarket near me, and it was one of those Woolworths Metros. We've complained about those before on the podcast.
I can't believe you even stepped foot in one.
And I went to buy some stuff, and I was like, yeah, I'll whip something up for dinner tonight. And then I just walked through the place, and I just looked at the price and I go, this is utterly ridiculous. I'm not paying, like, I'm talking like, you know, when you buy frozen fish, like, because that's what I was literally going to buy. I was like, oh, that's easy enough, right? I'll just whack it in the oven, like frozen fish. You know,
When you say whip something up,
well, put it in the oven, right?
I'm hearing the rip of the baking paper.
But like frozen fish, like, come on, this should be like, it was like $10 for a box of frozen fish. Like, I just like, fuck that. I can go across the road to the fish and chip shop and buy like a full meal for $20. So I'm not going to spend $10 plus then I've got to buy everything else to make it like a more well-rounded meal to have shitty frozen fish imported from wherever, right? So yeah, I don't know. I feel it. Petrol prices, that's an obvious one. If you're renting, rental prices gone up. If you're a mortgage holder, mortgage interest rates have gone up. So yeah.
Yeah, look, I was about to say, like, because I think that once you take out housing, which I know is a huge part of it, right? But if you did put that to the side, where is the day-to-day stuff that you feel it, right? Because I don't necessarily know that the food court experience is that much worse when I look at it. And maybe I'm getting it wrong, but I don't seem to think that, like, when you go to McDonald's or, you know, sit down and get a curry or something, that much has changed in that kind of day-to-day food. I do think fuel definitely hurts. But yeah, I was just trying to scratch my head around, like, where do most people really feel it outside of housing?
Well, I can give you the figures. So unfortunately, I can't. There's no easy way to quickly reorder this. But in the past year, food and non-alcoholic beverages, 4.8% increase. Alcohol and tobacco, 4.9%.
Do you know what I mean, though? Do you feel it in the food court when you're buying your lunch?
Yeah, I do. Housing, 7%. Furnishings, household equipment and services, that's only 2.5%. Health, 5.4%. Transport, 5.6%. Recreation and culture, 5.6%. Insurance and financial services, 8.6%. So I don't know, that it's pretty broad based. I wouldn't say it's just petrol prices and housing. It's affecting everything. I think, like, the food court situation, let's say you know they're able to absorb because the drivers of costs within the food court, I mean, the predominant drivers would be labor and rents, commercial rents, right? So those are probably more stable, but so maybe not like in a hospitality setting as much. But yeah, I definitely, like, if you said to me there was like a 5% increase on average in most food courts, I'd be like, yeah, okay, sounds about right.
Yeah, I wondered, like, has McDonald's gone up? Because that's probably a pretty reliable indicator of the state of affairs, right? Because, you know, that is something where there's no price arbitrage really.
But see, McDonald's is like an interesting one because they are the type of business that does really well in circumstances like the one we're currently facing. So because McDonald's is like a cheap place to eat, right? So they can probably offset some of their cost pressures through volume, right? Increasing volume. I don't know how their business cost structure works, but presuming it is like labor and commercial rents is like the key costs.
Yeah.
So I think those sorts of businesses will always want to retain their perception as being like a cheap place to go and eat, right? So I think they will fight against price increases longer than other parts, but definitely supermarket. I definitely noticed a lot of price increases in the supermarket, which is why I didn't buy dinner in the supermarket tonight. But I think the other thing as well, like if you look at the psychology of the way consumers engage in like their everyday purchasing decisions, like there's sort of like an art form to the whole tap and go payment culture where you don't even like look at the price of things anymore. Like people are so desensitized to, I mean,
Yeah.
they don't even know what they're in the, they'll do a sneaky thing like they'll give you like 2 less chocolate biscuits rather than increasing the price by 20% sort of thing. And that's how they'll get you sort of, so I don't know, there's all these little sneaky things going on as well.
And I think that, like, we've spoken about this at length in our cheapskate episode, right? Because I think that buyer mentality, right, that consumer mentality changes so wildly between person to person. Some people don't know the price of things, and they're unfazed by it, especially when it comes to food. So, I think that it's multifaceted. When does the pendulum swing back that way, right? Because that's what they said. When I say they, I'm talking about the government. They would focus on bread and butter issues post the voice referendum.
Well, I think they would say they are focusing on it. It's just that they can't do fuck all about it, right? And this is the reality because...
No, but like there's a difference between being able to actually do fuck all about it versus talking about it.
Yeah, so I think they're saying, they'll say we're focusing on it, and every second utterance will be, oh, we're focusing on the matters that affect the Australian people, including cost of living, la-da-da-da-da. But there's no lever for them to pull. In fact, the irony is that the levers they have to pull are things that are going to make things get worse. So it's going to be a combination of interest rates going up more and to curb inflation, or it's going to be the government making a decision not to give tax cuts that it's scheduled to give to households. So those things will be perceived as an attack on cost of living because there's less money in the pocket, but you kind of need less money in the pocket to curb inflation because inflation is the result of more demand than supply, right? So
I feel that. And I think that I heard a stat that taking into all, the slicing and dicing of the numbers that they do, that the average Sydney homeowner since the beginning of, the period of rate rises from its relatively stable low base on a, $1 million mortgage, it's like, I think they've had to fine $2,400 a month extra.
Oh, I think it would be more than that for many people.
Yeah, well, I mean that getting that money out of nowhere, right? An extra $2,500 every month.
So your figure to like $2,500, then you factor in what that is in terms of a tax-free income. So that let's say double that. So that's the equivalent of your pay going down by $50,000 a year.
Yeah, that's nuts. So let's shift a little bit. I have a very simple question to ask you. And it's to do with Albanese's diplomatic visit to China, or China. Do you also agree that he is a handsome boy?
Well, I think they drew him very handsomely in the One Nation cartoons.
And actually, do you think there was any? I mean, you're a little bit of a China-phile, right? Do you think there was any kind of demeaning nature of that, or is it just lost in translation?
No, I think it's just lost in translation. I think it's I just think there's so many layers of weirdness in culturally, that
bureaucratic weirdness or just cultural weirdness.
Oh, both.
Because it's a bit weird though, isn't it? Let's be honest, when it's not it's a bit off key to call a head of state kind of.
Well, I didn't follow this all that closely, other than I thought that there were people in China, regular citizens, who were referring to him in that way. But
it was just a TikTok clip of him walking around in a Matilda's jersey of all things, and just Premier League, I think, was saying that. It was just a handsome boy.
So, look, I think the easiest way to answer this question is go to China. Maybe not the easiest logistically, but the easiest conceptually. Go to China and scan with your phone. Just go to the first restaurant that you see and scan with your phone the names of the dishes on the menu. And the flourishing language that they use on menus in China means that even when you translate it's not quite a translation.
All right. So you think this is just confused by language?
Yeah, I think so.
All right, but on a serious note, though, Australians have been under a variety of kind of, shall we call it punitive measures in terms of trade sanctions and things like that from China. That was, a lot of those were cleared up. would you say that it's been a bit of a how do we kind of place the actual diplomatic outcome?
I think if you're a business that's not able to export your products, you would say it's a very good outcome. But at the same time, it's always a balancing act with China, and I think different governments have approached it in different ways in the past, and I don't think any country's really there's just not a lot of trust. I think it's like, are you just giving us enough of goodwill now so you can screw us over later in a more profound way? And that's the mistrust. And then you've got a country in China that's not very self-confident, so it wants to be top dog and be perceived as top dog, but it knows that no one respects it as that. So it's I don't know, I'm just trying to think of an analogy. It's like when you've got, I don't know, you've got a group of colleagues and one of them gets promoted suddenly and they're never really respected as the boss by the other. It's a little bit like that, and they want to be respected as the boss, so they act in this kind of way, in these really weird ways, but they're not but they're really self-conscious about it. And yeah, so I don't know, it's just a little bit tricky, I guess. Okay, so we had the voice referendum, and then Albanese goes to China, and he goes to America, and then I don't even know where he is now, but it feeds into this perception of he's a government that doesn't really care about you. The other thing is of course, and we haven't talked about it today, but of course we've got the Israel-Palestine thing going on as well, and the government's got to it can't just be ignore it, right? It can't just be completely silent on an issue like that, because there's even though it's an international sort of matter that it could just say it doesn't affect us, but you've got populations here in Australia that do have views. You've got increasing in tensions and all that sort of stuff, and Australia does have an international position on it, and it has to convey that to its allies or whatever. And you've got this, just there's no upside to this for the government in engaging in this topic, because there's no position it can take that will not offend a group in the community, right?
Do you really think there are votes at play here? Do you really think that, say, you could get somewhere that out in Western Sydney that votes Labor to totally flip out to the other side purely on this issue?
I don't know, probably not, but I do think...
you know what I mean? What's the same with the Americans, right? You're really going to cross the the other side of the bench for this one issue? Probably not.
Yeah, but I think the issue is that it's not so much...
Because you'll find strange bedfellows on the other side.
Well, I think there's probably different levels of power structures, right? There's the vote that we have every 3 years in an election, and you're right, probably not though. If you mishandle it, you'll be perceived as incompetent, and then that's the thing that will generate a broader view. But then you do have power bases within the Labor Party. You definitely have very strong views within the Labor Party. So the government, as the Labor Party in power, has to kind of navigate internal, kind of very strong internal views on it. And even it kind of has to do that. And it's not about necessarily winning votes of the general public, but yeah, anyway, I just think this is the thing, they have to talk about it. But again, when when the government's talking about this thing, it's not winning votes, but it's distracting from a sense that, hey, we're concerned with the cost of milk. You know what I mean?
Yeah. No, sorry, that wasn't a laugh about the cost of milk.
It's very serious.
Very serious. But there are a lot of different milk grades you can buy. I'm surprised every day, actually.
So in the last couple of weeks, we have had the whole debate around NIMBYism and kind of the quarter-acre block house is a thing of the past. We need to move on with that and develop, and we need to have more housing. We've had the whole thing of the eastern suburbs needs to take a greater share. We've got golf courses that are being carved up for not more housing per se, but green space for significant increases in apartments nearby and stuff like that.
Dude, you can't take away the golf courses. they're like the open air prisons, right? A different kind of open air prison. They're keeping all those psychopaths at bay. You get rid of that, where they're going to go to? They're going to leach into the communities, disrupting even more people.
Don't you think this is like the biggest problem for mainstream Australia? Like the housing situation?
Of course, yes. When I think about the things that I'm most resentful about in life, it's the kind of feeling of our generation of like doing well at school, getting a decent job, feeling like you're going to do actually things that your parents weren't allowed to do because, you know, you're kicking a lot of goals and you've made all the right decisions, only for the housing market to pull you down to you know, pull you back down to earth and realize, oh, I am literally just another brick in the wall, peddling, and actually doesn't really, you're left with this feeling of resentment and bitterness that says, no matter how hard you work and sacrifice, it's not really going to make a difference, right? It's just going to be eaten up by, you know, giving more money to the big four banks, right? And yeah, I totally agree. It's like demoralizing. It's caused a lot of mental anguish and a lot of like sucked a lot of the joy out of life for most people, right? Like working in jobs that they don't like to kind of service these houses, right? It's not even like people are wasting money on frivolous things. They are literally pumping all of their money and their effort into a house that they grew up in, less than what they grew up in. You know what I mean?
So
like,
how much of that do you think is, I mean, look, there's definitely a problem in that we don't have enough housing, right? We definitely, we have a mismatched housing stocks. We've got lots of older couples in like 5-bedroom homes, and you've got lots of families, young families in 1 or 2-bedroom apartments, right? So you've got this mismatch, and that's part of it. But then, you know, arguably you'd probably say, well, you know, you might say, okay, well, let's just swap everyone, swap the boomers and get them from their big homes and swap in the young families. And of course, it's not that simple, but you might say that if you did that sort of a swap, then we'd be all right. But the reality is,
you're describing a nursing home?
like it's plain that like if the typical like Australian family aspires to have that sort of quarter-acre block home, because that's what they grew up in, sort of, you know, predominantly, then there's just not enough of those homes, right? Or those homes are located very far away from jobs and where people work and stuff. And so like there's not enough housing if that's the goal. But then I guess the question is it reasonable to say, because Sydney is not the same city as it, and Melbourne would be the same as it was when we were growing up, right? It's a more international city. It's a bigger city. There's more things going on here. And the equivalent city to Sydney 20 years ago, 30 years ago would be, in terms of activity, you know, maybe like either a smaller capital city, maybe Adelaide or maybe Newcastle. You know, if you compare like for like, you can still get those sorts of properties if you move to regional Australia. But people don't really want to do that. They want to stay where they grew up, where their families and friends are. So like, how much of this is we just need to like suck eggs on this? Like, we just need to come to terms with the fact that your parents could reasonably expect to have that detached house, but you got to give that up, because look outside, look at all the people here now. It's a international city. This is more New York than it is Sydney of 50 years ago.
It's an interesting question that you propose, right? And I think that it's very hard, like just taking kind of our experience, it's quite hard to grow up in Middle Australia in the kind of like modest houses that we lived in an hour away from the city centre and think that that is too much. Like we were living in a fantasy land that you should be able to afford that. Like I think that it's an interesting prospect, but I've never had that point of view, right? Like, yes, you can be grateful that you have, you know, that you're in a detached house and things like that, but I just don't think suburban living should be that. Like, I mean, I think when I look at how it's situated and how it's sprawled away from the city centre, right? Like, we didn't grow up close to the city, and I know just what you mean, because trying to find some property back where we grew up, you're looking at like, oh, that was my friend's house and now it's for sale, but it's just like $3 million. They haven't built anything since we were kids. It's been locked up. But at the same time, like, I don't know, like I don't think that suburban living in that way is too much to ask for. You know, I really don't. I understand if you're saying like, oh no, you are 10, 15, 20, 25 minutes away from the city. Maybe there shouldn't be such big properties, freestanding properties. But there's got to be a place for suburban living. And I think as a man with a big family, like I do think that, yes, you can do it, but when you have a certain number of kids and everything that comes with that, there is real impacts to your well-being when you do jam them into a space that's too small. Right?
But what if I say there is such a place, right, where you can have affordable suburban living?
Yeah.
It's just not in Sydney.
Yeah, look, I mean, then my mind goes to, okay, so when my mother bought a place, you know, where we grew up, she moved from a much more urban centre, and her friends literally laughed at her and said, no one wants to live an hour away from the city. That you're buying in kind of like a wilderness that's is not ever going to grow in value, in capital value, right? So I understand this idea of you have to move a bit further out, and things took a while to kind of catch up in terms of transport and opportunities and things like that, and obviously then other kind of like hubs. But if you kind of follow your logic and we move out even further, what does that look like for Sydney? And where then?
What if it's not in Sydney though? What if it's Maitland or Adelaide or, you know, yeah, like, because the problem with Sydney, right, is it's the Sydney Basin. You've got natural limits of where new housing can be built, and we don't build dense, like the density of housing historically hasn't. So the opportunities to build more housing in Sydney is like increased density in like current like urban areas. So like knock down, you know, go and buy like 10 houses and build like massive apartments. And that's what they're doing, right? That's where the houses are coming from. It's where the new housing's coming from. And then that means you've got to get used to the idea of living in an apartment. Or you tack on more houses to the outskirts of Sydney. But then the problem is now the outskirts of Sydney is like so far away. But then when you look at places like Maitland, just to nominate an example, like you can get very cheap housing there, new housing, good quality housing stock, large property like sizes, all that sort of stuff, and it's very affordable. Well, I mean, it's not affordable, but compared to Sydney, it is. And you have to work in that part of the world. Like you probably wouldn't live there and commute to Sydney, but maybe you don't get paid the same. But then if you do the maths and you think, okay, well, I don't quote me on any exact prices, but let's say you could buy a very good house for between $700,000 and $800,000, right? And then you work back, okay, well, in what year do you have to get to in Sydney where that same equivalent circumstance applies? So you could buy something for $700,000, $800,000, and you might go back 15, 20 years, right? And then you think, okay, well, what were the typical salaries 15, 20 years ago? And the salaries in that part of the world will be on par with what it would have been in Sydney. So it's just this kind of disconnection, like where literally Sydney's reached like its limits and people just have to kind of move out. And the price mechanism is the thing that's making people do that.
Yeah, well, why don't more people move out?
Well, I guess they are. They're all moving to Queensland and Maitland too. Maitland's freaking booming, you know. But I'm just using that as an example. But I do just sort of wonder, like, how much of this is just got to suck eggs on it.
Yeah, look, I get it. Right, I get it. You got to be practical about it. But I guess where the dissatisfaction comes from is that, you know, it's that wage to house ratio, right? Like it's just gone crazy because of what you've said and the realities around supply. But it's left with this idea of, you know, like our parents did it on a fairly meager bracket of salary. They were able to do it, and yes, they might have had to take some sacrifices to do that. But we were led to believe we will be able to do the same, if not more, by essentially getting jobs and incomes in that higher echelon, and it's just not the case. And so whenever that happens, you're left with a generation of people who are very disenfranchised with the situation, right? Like the kind of the promise of fool's gold.
Well, we talked about this a few episodes ago, but like young people entering the workforce now, like what they're like, they must literally just have given up on the prospect of owning the home they live in, and it must be just, I'm just here to have like a fucking good time. I've got all this disposable income. I'm not even going to bother saving for a deposit. I'm just going to maybe invest some money in shares or something, but just going to live large. Like I'm not going to run this race that like it's such a boomer Gen X, Gen Y thing to.
Well, unfortunately, I can't even do that now because of rent.
Yeah, but you can live in share houses. You can, and by the time they get into state, I mean, they don't have to have kids anymore. It actually would be interesting to see what the effect on birth rates are. Like it's, I'm just thinking through like, there's always a way. Like there's always a way to kind of deal with it. You just got to adapt and respond. And it's the equivalent. Well, what we're going through now, it's the equivalent of not buying bananas when there's a cyclone in Queensland because they're $30 a kilo. Like that's the situation you're in when something becomes so expensive that you don't value it anymore. You stop buying it and you buy other things whether it's overseas holidays or, I don't know, whatever, right? All right. So before we finish off, you have to give me your numbers. We haven't done it for a few weeks.
We haven't, and I've had my birthday there, so actually I've consumed quite a lot of cake. I've been sick, so go easy on me. But I have continued my trend upwards. Unfortunately, it wasn't it wasn't a dead cat bounce. So unfortunately, I am 2 kilos heavier than I started. But I do think there is a bit of muscle memory coming back. I am a little bit, stronger looking than I started. So I'm going to cling to that. So maybe I'm going the slight bulk before I cut for summer. That's my thing. Okay. But I'm 2 kilos up. What about you?
Well, congratulations. Okay. So I don't have a figure because, no pun intended, I haven't weighed myself since we last recorded. I'll be curious to see how I've gone and I'm preparing for it. Okay, if I've gone down, I'll be very happy with that. But because I've just come back from a trip and where I sort of was it's a little bit hard when you're traveling to be too strict. But that said, like I didn't go crazy, so I
you do a lot of walking on holidays as well.
Oh yeah, not this holiday. But the other thing too is, so there's like two things. One is like, I've kept up the 1 meal a day thing apart from I think 2 days when I was on holidays. So that's actually been okay. But the one thing where I'm a little bit worried is like the dinners have been rubbish. Like
extravagant.
They've not been kind of moderate, sort of as moderate. So yeah, I'm just curious to see how that's going.
Have you been drinking?
I drank when I was on holidays. I drank definitely more than I would normally drink, but not crazy. Still not crazy. And over the past, like if it's say 2 weeks since I've weighed in, then not that much over the period. But like the other thing, like what was going really well for me, I think, is that I was doing like home cooked every night, like no junk food, no ordering out, no restaurants, anything like that. But since we've come back, I haven't had a single meal. That's why I wanted to go to the supermarket to buy it. The 1 meal a day thing's fine. Like that's on track. Like I haven't lost any momentum there, but I just need to get the diet a bit better.
I mean, is there a part of you that wonders like how long you'll keep the 1 meal a day up for?
I think that's actually.
Have you thought of like life after that?
Yeah, no. Well, this is the thing. I don't know that. I know it's a big call to say like I'm going to keep doing it for the rest of my life, but I think like right now, if you said to me, you have to do it for medical reasons, I'd survive that.
Talk to me about like, okay, so because you are the experiment right now, right? Like obviously only one of us has changed, made meaningful changes in their lifestyle at the moment. Apart from, go to the gym and injure myself a few times. So all the benefits that they talk about when you start fasting, right? Which is essentially what you're doing like a big fasting window. You're meant to feel all these different things like mental clarity, different kind of cellular cleaning and all this other stuff. Have you experienced any of that?
No. I mean, the best I could say is that I haven't felt like downside.
Self-righteousness doesn't count as a benefit.
well, the only thing I'd say is I haven't felt downside. So it's like if you don't eat, you can get really frustrated with not eating, right? So if you take the average person on the street and you say to them you're not allowed to eat for 24 hours, they will like come sort of 20 hours in, be like a bit hangry, right? And so I'm kind of through that. Like I don't really feel that, and snacking and stuff's not really. I don't have this urge to snack or anything like that. But I don't think there's any benefits to the fasting per se. I think it's just beneficial because
pure calories
it just reduces
kind of
you. Yeah, it's hard to eat. I mean, when you think about it, like I don't know.
That's disappointing.
Yeah. So I don't know what, like for me, maintain my weight calories a day would be something like 2,000 and a bit thousand calories a day. And so theoretically, if I ate, well, let's just say it's 2,200 calories. I don't know if that's right or not, but it's something like that. Then theoretically, that if you factor that into one meal, it's going to be pretty hard to eat a 2,200 calorie meal if you're just having that one meal. So that's probably the equivalent of like 2 Big Mac meals, for example. So it's most meals you have.
I could definitely eat 2 Big Mac meals.
Like
I've got to be honest with you.
That's
I could definitely do that.
But that's pretty hard to do in one sitting and feel good about yourself, right? So
do you want to know what I ate for lunch today? I'll fess up on air. So I was at the food court and I thought to myself, look, I really want something, but I'm going to show some level of restraint. So I'll have a chicken burger, right? Because it's mainly, lean meat. And then I tricked myself into thinking that a Porto Bondi double was a chicken burger. And so I ordered that. And then I showed some restraint and I said, no fries, like no chips, right? Or soda or anything like that. So I had that, ate that down, and it tasted so good. I was like, this is delicious. And then I just literally had the bloodlust. And I'm like, I want more. And so I then immediately walked 5 meters across in the food court and ordered a double cheeseburger meal. And I ate that directly after.
Good for you.
And then after that, I ordered a Starbucks sweet cream cold brew.
I had this situation where I was at McDonald's and I think I was getting something for my son. And I did want something for myself, but not food. Like I wanted like a drink, like something from the McCafe menu. Yeah. And like they've got so many different kind of variations of very similar things. So if you know how you've got like iced coffee and then they've got like lots of different variants of it.
The deluxe version of it.
Yeah. And it's actually really hard to navigate. And it's like, so I was looking through the different options they had, and there was the first one, which I've actually had before, and it's like a really guilty pleasure. It's like one of those Frappuccino style drinks.
Yeah.
And they're kind of like, they taste so good, but they're so bad for you. And I saw that one and it was like, okay, that would be like, if I could swing it, I'd get that. But like, I'm on a diet, so I have to look at the calories. Like, I have to know what it is. And it was like something like 700, 800 calories. And I'm like, no fucking way.
They're terrible. They're really, really bad. And I used to be one of those people who like couldn't stand when people would order like vanilla shots in their coffee or whatever, right? Because the idea would be gross. And when I tasted it, I was like, it's not good enough for me to waste the calories on. But the moment I do have one of those really deluxe drinks like the one you're talking about, and I always get that one when I'm driving up the coast, like on a long holiday, there's always drive-through Macca's. I'll always get something like that. And they're undeniable. And this is why places like Starbucks and all these things work, because they don't deal in your regular true coffees. They deal in the sugar bombs that you get when you get this big fucking drink and it's like full of ice and syrup and like whipped cream and all sorts of stuff that like, it's like an adult milkshake. And it is so good, and your body rewards you almost instantly. Like whatever you get from the caffeine high, double that. There's a multiplier effect with all the sugar, and you feel good. You feel really, really good. And I think it is a real guilty pleasure. And it goes to show, right? Like I was like thinking to myself today, like, how should I feel about that binge that I had? Right? That's a pretty poor indictment of like my mental state, that I am vulnerable enough to like buy a meal after a meal.
Can I ask, what did you have for dinner?
I cooked dinner for like the kids and stuff. So that's because I was by myself as well, right? I would have never pulled that.
But did you have
with kids around?
Did you have a big dinner though?
Yeah, I had pasta, so it was big as well.
Because the thing is, like, the meal you just talked about, like that's the kind of thing that, like, as like indulgent as that sounds, what you just described, like on my diet, like I could,
if that's all,
I could get away with that, right? Because I'm not sure. Did you have breakfast as well?
Yeah, I've had every meal today.
So okay, so this is the thing, right? So breakfast, like, I've always been able to not have. I've always survived not having breakfast. So this is just an extension of that. So that's why
you've just sparked this memory for me, man. Like, I remember one time we were out doing some content and things, and then we rocked back to your place, and we opened the door, and your wife and your son were smashing a burger, and it was just like maybe, I don't know, like an hour before dinner, like 5:30 or something. And I just had this sense come over me of like jealousy of just like how regimented my meals are because of the kids and stuff. And here, like, your son and your wife are literally just like, oh, are you a bit hungry, are you? Oh, we'll just smash a burger. Like, it doesn't matter what time. It doesn't. I don't know where Andy is. He's doing something. But let's just grab a burger. And just in that moment, I just felt like, oh, I'm missing a beat here. Like, this is how it used to be, you know. And then you came in, like, where's my burger? No, where's your burger?
And then you went to the food court and smashed a Porto's.
Is there anything sadder than like doing what I did, but if you did it in a car? I think that would make it even worse.